Hi, welcome to this quick tutorial of how to make a very simple wire armature based on our Wild Boar Piglets, which is the Maker's Box number 71, April 2023. This particular technique also works really well for the little Highland Coo and also for the little reindeer. So you don't just have to use it for a project like this, you can use it for other projects that we already have in our program. And for this, all you need is the 45 centimeter long wire, flexible steel wire, and you need some of the core wool. In this case, it's lanolin rich core wool. Now I'm going to be very naughty and I cut my wire with scissors. And because I've got 45 centimeters, I know each length needs to be 15 centimeters, so they're all equal long lengths. And I just cut the first one at 15 and then use that as a template for the others. And so now I have got 3 same length wires all ready to work with. Now I'm going to move these up a little bit, these little piglets. And what I suggest is that you start, if you have never wrapped wool around a wire, then start with one where you can cut yourself a little bit of slack if it doesn't look quite as neat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the instructions out of the box so you can see that we have a really useful template in there which shows you that this is the wire frame that we want to get to. So this is what I'm doing today, but the frame itself also works for other projects. It will just be slightly differently bent, but in general it is the same principle. So for the boar, I'm going to use my wool and I split it. In fact, I tease it a little bit longer, so try and split a strand off, but then tease it a little bit longer. And what you're going to do is, for this particular one, you're going to start wrapping it at one end so that you cover the wire neatly with a layer of wool. And you are going to, I'm just going to open that page, so you're going to wrap it so that when you've got a good established bit of wool on there, you're going to bend the wire in by about 1/2 centimeter. Try and keep it quite minimalistic so that you've basically trapped that wool in that bend, and then push it shut and then continue wrapping the wool around it. Now notice that I'm going round, so I'm going over and under and round and round and round. I show you now what you should not be doing, and that is this. Hold on to the end and just do that, because in effect what you're doing is you're twisting the wool with every wrap you make, and you end up with a really tightly twisted, almost string-like bit of wool. It really doesn't stick to the wire, and as you can see, I can just literally undo it. If you keep the wool nice and narrow and nice and thin, so work with small quantities and keep it tight to the wire, so work close to the wire and then pull tight with every wrap. Now your first attempt might not look as neat as this, and that's absolutely fine. This is why the one that you're wrapping right now, that you can necessarily tell the difference, the one that you're wrapping right now will be the spine wire, and that means that you don't have to, there will be lots of layers going over it, so it doesn't matter if it's not so neat. When you get to the end of a wool strand, instead of continuing up the wire, go back on yourself so that the wool grips into itself, and that will make sure that the wool stays nice and tidy in place. And then when you take a new wool strand, so tease a bit off, keep it going in this direction because you're going to cover the whole length of the wire and you're bending that end over. Don't get tempted to turn it round and start at this end, because as you're wrapping the wool that way, you will unwind the wool that you've wrapped on that side. So continue in the same direction, establish the wool on top of the already wrapped wool around the wire, and just keep going. You can, however, turn the whole thing over and twist the wire to let the wool slither through your fingers. That is absolutely fine. Get to the very end. I'm going to run out of wool now. That's okay. And as before, bend the wire in. I'm just going to get rid of that last bit of wool. bent the wire in, you should have enough. Now, because I actually started that way, I'm going to establish a new strand of wool from that direction again. That is as simple as that to remember. But then of course, so now I've got it established, and because I know which way I'm wrapping, I can complete the other end, so that now all the wool wrapped on there has been wrapped in the same direction. Now, if this is your first attempt for a spine pipe cleaner, you have done really well. When you get this, when you've practiced on this, then you can move to the legs, and they're done in exactly the same way. So we're not colouring the legs in yet. We're making literally 3 covered wires of the same length, all in this lanolin rich core wool. So once you've got the hang of it, now you can work a little bit more neatly. So keep the wool wraps very tight and thin, tease the wool out, turn the whole thing round, because it does definitely give a neater wrap if you use the wire and twist it so that it runs through your fingers, the wool runs through your fingers as you wrap it, and that you've got more control over the thickness of the wool that you're wrapping. Again, if the leg is a little bit thicker than this, it's absolutely fine. In fact, in the instructions we talk about it being a little bit bulkier, but I'm just showing you how thin you could be making this. So I'm wrapping the rest of the wool around there. I actually do want you to make the wire a little bit thicker, because we need to have a bit of wool on there to felt it into the shape. So I'm just adding another layer over the top. I've started exactly in the same position as we did earlier, so I've turned the whole thing round again. If you come across a bit of what we call vegetable matter, I don't know if you saw it earlier, there was a bit of grass that I've wrapped around. It doesn't really matter, it will be well hidden inside, and it's completely natural, especially in some of the core wools, because it's going to stay inside. So I've made a second one that looks a little bit neater than the first one, and now I'm going to make a third one that's even neater or the same. If you've wrapped lots of wire before, you will have no problems whatsoever doing this. This is really just a tip for total beginners, but also just to give you an idea that wire armature doesn't have to sound scary. Wire armature can just be literally wires, very, very basic wires, and then basically formed into what is it called? A frame. Into a frame. So wire armature always sounds a little bit intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. So practice your wire wrapping on the first wire, and then perfect it on the second and the third, and but do make sure you have a nice layer on top of that, on top of the leg wires as well, because we do need to use the wool on the leg wires to to fasten to the spine wire, and I'll show you that in a minute. So I'm going to add another layer on this one, and then I'm ready to show you how to fasten them together. Now, there are different ways how you could be fastening together, but with a boar piglet we're doing it in a certain way. For the little reindeer and also for the Highland coo, it was done slightly differently, which I will explain, but I'll show you how to do it for the boar piglet, because this is what this is all about. So I've got the legs covered now. I've got my middle wire for the spine. Now I'm referring to the template, and if you can see, the back is slightly bent up, and that is to stop the hind legs from slipping off. So I'm going to just bend that up a little bit. So I've got a stopper here, and to fasten these legs on, you are literally just giving them, you'll bend them down, so you've got the middle point, and you're sitting them onto the wire in that way, so they do come off. You're not twisting them around once, which is how some of the other armatures are done, including the one for the reindeer and the little Highland coo. So to fasten the wire on, if you've got enough wool on your leg wire, you can literally just take a felting needle and stab into the 2 wool layers. Try not to stab into your wire, That is one way. If there is enough wool on there, it might actually be quite nice to get rid of some by just stabbing into it. However, if you don't have a lot of wool, then just take a little bit of spare wool and begin wrapping this around the join, so that you are literally tying the join up, making sure that that little end is sticking up. And that will add a little bit of wool onto the layers, and now you can stab into that wool layer, and that will catch the fibers and stab them also into the legs and into the spine wire. So that is how you would fasten the legs on, always making sure that they're actually the same length. So this one is good enough to just stay in place for now. Just give it a couple more stabs up here where the wool is sticking out. Don't worry if it's still movable like this. All of this will be prevented by wrapping more wool around it, and then shape the rest of your wire into the shape of the template, so that you've got a slight curved back, you've got the head going down, and then this is where the shoulders are. Remember that point, and now you're going to fasten these legs on in exactly the same way as you did with the hind legs. So if you can, stab into the wool around the wires first, just to secure it a little bit. But if that is not possible, then do take extra wool and wrap this around the joints up here, so that you can then felt that down. And that should be everything you need to know to get you going with this with the wire armature. Make sure before you felt it on that it's still in that position. So you want that to be in the right place. Just move this back a bit as I've pushed them up accidentally. So felt these on, and now you have got a very, very basic wire armature or wire frame. And I do apologize for sniffling. I have actually got a cold, which is why I'm only showing you my hands today, because I look a mess. So here we go. Just felt that into place, and then you're off by adding more bulk to your currently very, very skinny little boar piglet, or whatever else you're using this for. And just to put it into practice, you can see this is the shape that we're following. So the legs are here, and then back here at the end as well, and then that forms the snout. Now the snout is a little bit of an extension, so there's no wire right in the front of the nose, which is good because you need to sculpt it. And also the legs obviously will be bent, and also you will be creating a bit of space between the legs. So whilst this looks all very skinny and long-legged, the legs will become more in proportion, because in effect they will be pushed out, so that they are no longer that A-frame but more of a bend, and they will be absolutely perfect once you've added the bulk to it. And that's all of it. So remember, this is the Wild Boar Piglet tutorial, and to make these two from our makers box, and that is number 71 in April 2023, but also a really good skill to know for other very basic wire armature animals. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.